boxing news. Ow! Okay, we'll start with this. Well, the daughter of the late, great Muhammad Ali, Rasheeda Ali, took to social media in light of the lawsuit Terence Crawford is levying against Bob Arum, claiming racial bias. Rasheeda stated, "Bob Arum stood with my father when the world was against him. Bob and my father are a big reason why black and brown athletes are fairly compensated today. Proud that my son, Nico Ali Walsh, is part of Team Top Rank."
They've been trying to assassinate Bob Arum's character.
Thus, Rasheeda Ali is coming forward as a character witness in defense of Bob Arum.
Let the games begin.
I told you guys about 100 times over the course of 2 days that I'm not going to die on a hill over this thing. Terence Crawford can either substantiate his claim in order to win the case, constitute a racial bias against him that costed him millions.
He can either do it or he can't.
I'm not emotionally invested in this thing at all, like some of you out there. Some of you out there who claim that this case isn't about a racial bias, it's about a breach of contract.
Oh, it's just about a breach of contract.
So all that stuff about how black fighters are treated, you're saying that's not coming from Terence Crawford and his legal counsel, it's coming from who?
Who's it coming from, the journals?
Because when I read through the New York Post's article in reference to all of this, it cited Terence Crawford's claims.
His claims.
Terence Crawford's statements and his legal counsel's statements.
His claims.
Not some pencil pusher, not some journalist, not some editor.
His claims.
Terence Crawford's and his legal counsel.
There are guys out there right now claiming this case ain't about a racial bias, it's about a breach of contract. That's all it is.
Well, if this case ain't about a racial bias, as Terence Crawford and his legal counsel alleges, why'd they make so many mentions of it?
You know, I had one guy tell me that that's just the way the article was written.
It's clickbait intended to sell newspapers, and yet the article wouldn't have been written that way if Terence Crawford and his legal counsel hadn't have provided those statements in the first place.
A journalist can't take it upon themselves to make statements on Crawford's behalf.
The allegations and accusations being levied against Bob Arum are coming from Terence Crawford himself and his legal counsel, and no journalist is at liberty to paraphrase or fabricate statements for Terence Crawford or his legal counsel. Thus, the crux of the case seems to be what they're calling pattern behavior from Bob Arum.
Racial bias against black fighters.
That's what the case details as Terence Crawford and his legal counsel attempt to assassinate Bob Arum's character. In turn, a character witness has come forward in the form of Rasheeda Ali, the daughter of the late great Muhammad Ali,
to speak up in Bob Arum's defense.
There are a lot of people out there that are a lot more emotionally invested in this case than I am, because I reiterate, I'm not going to die on a hill over this thing. Terence can either constitute the racial bias and substantiate his claims in order to win the case, or he can't.
And it's that fucking simple.
Society has changed, somewhat influenced by the digital era, where you get to say whatever you want about whoever you want to say it about via social media.
Without consequence, it doesn't have to be true.
And on social media, you can say whatever you want about whoever you want to say it about. You don't have to prove it. However, in a court of law, it don't work like that.
You might see a wave of outrage by way of social media,
where the burden of proof is absolute zero for the accuser, and many like-minded individuals might fall in line with a particular way of thinking in the absence of proof, in the absence of evidence.
You can make baseless accusations on Twitter because what do they really cost?
However, in a court of law, when you're suing for damages, something to the tune of $10 million.
You're not on Twitter anymore. You're going to have to prove how this guy costed you $10 million.
You say that he's a racist and he treated you unfairly. He didn't promote you as well as he promoted other fighters of other denominations.
You're not on Twitter anymore. You're going to have to prove how this guy costed you $10 million.
It's not the strongest case I've seen, if I'm being honest, saying that Bob Arum has a racial bias against black fighters and offers preferential treatment to white and Latino fighters, yet Terence Crawford was being guaranteed more money up front than most, if not all of, the
most white and Latino fighters that fight under Top Rank.
If you're alleging that you were treated less than white and Latino fighters over their Top Rank, then you're going to have to explain why your contract minimum is higher than Vasyl Lomachenko's, higher than Artur Beterbiev's, higher than Vozdik's contract minimum when he was an active fighter. Does Oscar Valdez get the same kind of money up front?
Oscar Valdez, Jose Pedraza, Miguel Burchell,
based on them being Latino fighters that Terence Crawford alleges Bob Arum prefers.
Were those guys making the same kind of money you were making? Are they getting the same kind of guarantees that you were getting?
Because if you're saying that you were treated less than Caucasian fighters and Latino fighters, it's up to you to characterize that. You're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and the burden of proof is on the accuser. Terrence Crawford and his legal counsel are the accusers.
And Bob Arum is innocent until proven guilty.
A lot of people aren't going to like the sound of that. A guy that goes by the name of Donald Williams doesn't. He says, you and
Bob are like cousins. Because pussy, he don't talk bad, African Americans like you.
Oh, so you want me to assume he's guilty until proven innocent based on your butt hurt?
Is that how you think a court of law works? Donald Williams has a boil on his ass and it really hurts, so Bob Arum is guilty by default. He added,
your views in these videos say exactly who you are, bruh. You a closet racist. 90% of the time you have negative stuff to say about black fighters. You don't know what Bob says in private, #1 fighter, but no promotion, and he's a promoter.
I've levied criticism against fighters of all denominations. Black fighters, white fighters, even Latino fighters like Leo Santa Cruz, like Ryan Garcia, white fighters like Tyson Fury.
My criticisms have not been exclusive to any one group of any one denomination.
But let Donald Williams tell the story, and I'm only levying criticism towards fighters of just one specific group. One group of individuals, one group of fighters. And these kinds of fallacies, logical fallacies, and inaccuracies are permissible on YouTube, in the comments under a YouTube video, but not in a court of law, you fucking idiot.
And that's why no matter what you think about Bob Arum,
He is innocent until proven guilty, and the burden of proof is on the accuser, not the accused. It's up to Terrence Crawford and his legal counsel to substantiate what it is they're saying, not me and not you.
You expect me to coddle you because you're too stupid to understand that?
On Twitter, a guy that goes by the name of Eli stated that because Bob Arum was born in 1931, that makes him guilty by default. He is most definitely a racist, and that might work on Twitter. That might work on social media. But not in a court of law. Yeah, on social media, where you can say whatever you want with impunity, zero evidence, you can get away with that. But in a court of law, when you say that Bob costed you $10 million because of his racial bias, okay, that, you're gonna have to prove that.
Some guys think they got a license to judge, but nobody else does.
That's what they think. In their mind's eye, they think that no one else is allowed to look at the situation and formulate an opinion of their own.
You don't pay any bills around here.
Opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one, and they're entitled to it. And in the court of public opinion, you can look at Bob however the fuck you want to look at Bob, but in a court of law, well, that's different. In a court of law, you've got to prove what you're saying, and it's a question of whether or not Terrence Crawford can do that, whether you like it or not. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Bob Arum, who everybody's been talking about as of late.
If he, Dillian Whyte, wants the fight and stops messing around, he can get a good payday and prove that he is of a world-class caliber by taking on Tyson Fury. Come to the table and let's see if we can carve out a real deal. Let's quit screwing around.
$5 million up front at 25% of the split is screwing around, in my opinion. Oh, I know. I'm actually siding with Dillian Whyte, which goes against the narrative levied against me by some individuals out there who think I only favor fighters of a certain denomination. Better still, I've maintained my position throughout that $5 million up front, $5 million guaranteed at 25% of the split is not a good faith offer. You cannot hope to do this fight.
This isn't Otto Verlin and this isn't Tom Schwartz.
Even if Tyson Fury is the A-side to Dillian Whyte, which I take no issue with.
He is.
Even if he is. $5 million up front at 25% of the split, that's not a good faith offer. You don't seriously expect Dillian Whyte to fight.
Been a lot of talk about Dillian Whyte's last two fights.
And we've been all through that. We've looked at the numbers. Better still, his last two fights were fights that don't actually represent his actual marquee value, because those two fights, the Povetkin fights, the first one that he lost and the second one that he won, those two fights were fought in a bubble.
Tyson Fury's last two fights were fought in front of an audience.
So if the split is based on the fighter's last two fights, there is something to be addressed there when Dillian Whyte's actual marquee value is not being accurately represented. This is the guy that sold out the O2 Arena with an away fighter.
He did?
With Joseph Parker.
How many times has Tyson Fury sold out the O2 Arena in the last 3 or 4 years?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, though I have to say it again. I'm not telling you that Tyson Fury has no marquee value in the United Kingdom. I'm asserting that Dillian Whyte has his own marquee value. Tyson Fury did what he did in America with Deontay Wilder, and let's just pretend that Deontay Wilder had nothing to do with that.
Right.
All right, then let's see you do it again, Tyson Fury. Let's see you do it with someone else, someone like a Robert Helenius. Let's see if Fury versus Helenius in America results in a $18-19 million gate. Let's see it.
Dillian Whyte is the biggest bang for your buck fight out there for Tyson Fury.
There's got to be a little bit of gimme from both sides in order to get this fight over the line, though I will say $5 million up front and only 25% of the split, that don't get the fight done. A more reasonable number, in my humble opinion, would have to be, I don't know, maybe $6 or $7 million at 30%, at 35%. Anything more than that would seem unreasonable. But that number, that's a more doable number.
There's got to be a little bit of gimme from both sides in order to do this fight.
There's got to be some gimme from the Tyson Fury side of things, of course, but there also has to be some gimme from the Dillian Whyte.
There's got to be some gimme on his side, too, because it takes 2 teams to make a fight.
The scheduled purse bid in association with this fight has been rescheduled to later on this month on the 18th.
And you wonder if Bob Arum doesn't have that on the brain while he's saying this.
Because if this thing goes to a purse bid, what stops a Matchroom and DAZN from bidding on this fight? What stops them?
Bob doesn't want that to happen.
And I don't know, what stops Sky Sports from putting a bid in for this fight? What stops them?
I think Frank Warren in the UK wants to bring that to BT.
If he really wants to do the fight at all, BT, which is in the process of being bought out by DAZN and absorbed, though all the same, they haven't finalized that deal yet. So the purse bid for this thing is on the 18th.
And you wonder if Bob Arum doesn't have that on the brain while he's saying this.
For me, it would be an unexpected twist, an unexpected turn of events if this fight actually ends up going to a purse bid. Matchroom wins the bid, and by some chance Tyson Fury fights under the Matchroom banner against Dillian Whyte. I mean, that really is the last thing I'm expecting. I just don't see that happening. Though this being the sport of boxing, the theater of the unexpected,
Anything's possible, right?
right, we'll just have to wait and see. We gotta let this one play out.
I still feel like Tyson Fury might vacate that WBC title.
Still feel like that's a genuine possibility, though. If Tyson Fury proves me wrong and he hangs on to it, defends it against Dillian Whyte, I won't complain. I'd like to be proven wrong. I'd like to be wrong about this, though I'm not sure that I will be.
But I'd rather see the fight.
Because in the end, that's what a fight fan wants. A fight fan wants fights. Good ones. Just in keeping with the theme of good fights, a bit of welcome news by way of the heavyweight division, which we just talked about per a tweet from Michael Benson. Tony Yoka has now officially accepted the fight with Filip Hrgovic as an IBF final eliminator, according to Hrgovic's co-promoter, Kale Sarland. Winner will become Oleksandr Usyk's next IBF mandatory challenger.
Not but a day ago, Hrgovic issued a call out to Tony Yoka.
Tony Yoka, I heard some calling out from you after your last fight. Now the letter from IBF will come to you. Sign the contract. Let's make that fight. Now you have chance. What you gonna do?
Amateur rivals now turned professional. That's right. Tony Yoka's got 2 split decision wins over Filip Hrgovic by way of the amateurs. 2 against Joe Joyce.
Though they did fight more than just 2 times.
Smoke and Joe Joyce won at least one of those fights. This is an excellent matchup, an excellent fight between blue-chip prospects that come from great amateur backgrounds, now professionals.
I didn't think it was going to happen.
I didn't. I half expected Tony Yoka to reject this offer, this proposal, by way of the IBF because he was previously scheduled to face Martin Bakole, but they had to reschedule that fight due to pandemic issues over there in La France.
COVID restrictions.
I really didn't expect it to happen. I didn't. I expected Tony Yoka to reject the offer and simply reschedule his fight with Martin Bakole, but he has decided to take the bull by the horns and take his amateur rival on in the pros. An excellent fight, an excellent matchup.
It's almost too good to be true.
Seems that way. We're finding out more about these fighters, the both of them, little by little. We're finding out more about Tony Yoka and what kind of fighter he is, what he's really made of, because he could have easily hit out over there in France, fought more journeymen.
Could have.
Maybe rescheduled that Martin Bakole fight.
Which to me seems like a safer choice than this one.
And that's not a shot at Martin Bakole, but I feel like it's a more winnable fight than this one is. Facing Martin Bakole in your own neck of the woods where you have home field advantage at minimum, you can win a points decision. That would be a conservative prediction, whereas
against Hrgovic, it might not go to the cards.
It's an acid test for both boys, is what it is. Kinda like how Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce was an acid test between unbeaten fighters, with the difference being that Joe Joyce came from a more robust amateur background than Daniel Dubois did. Whereas these guys come from the same amateur background. They've actually fought each other before.
Tony Yoka's a statuesque fighter with a good amateur pedigree who can move and punch.
So far, what he's proven is that his boxing is his bread and butter, not necessarily his speed or his punching power. I'd wager that Filip Hrgovic might actually be a more concussive puncher than Tony Yoka is, but what Tony's got working for him is his athleticism, his physical dimensions, his movement, and his boxing. Will that be enough to topple Filip Hrgovic? I don't know. It's a battle of the unbeaten.
It's a credible enough argument for both of them to win this fight.
Tony Yoka sports a professional record of 11 wins, no losses, no draws with 9 knockouts. Filip Hrgovic sports a professional record of 14 wins.
No losses and no draws with 12 knockouts.
Filip's got 1 or 2 more fights than Tony does, but comparatively, Tony's faced the more experienced fighters, the more experienced veterans. Johan Duapa, Christian Hammer.
Filip did beat 2 unbeaten fighters in his last 2 fights.
And I got nothing against that, but beating Radonjic and Ramotovic, I mean, I learned more about Tony Yoka watching him against a Johan Duapa or a Christian Hammer than I do watching Filip Hrgovic plow through a Radonjic. Filip Hrgovic, a statuesque, heavy-handed Croatian boxer. Not much speed there, though there's definitely power, some movement, some defensive prowess, at least better.
Not an Accord-Nahoyle defensive fighter, but there's something there.
The next wave of world-class fighters, world-class contenders, is here, and that is what this contest will determine. The winner of this fight will take on the winner of Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk 2. It's just a matter of time. You wonder that the Tony Yoka people aren't deciding to take on this fight because Filip Hrgovic, in spite of being avoided by Luis Ortiz and being avoided by Joseph Parker, it really is now or never with this guy. You take him on now while he's not as experienced as he could be later on down the line, and you stand a better chance against him.
Because he's only going to gain more experience fight by fight.
And the more experience he gains fight by fight, the more dangerous he becomes fight by fight. Thus, it's now or never. You take care of this guy, so you get the winner of Joshua versus Usyk 2. Joshua versus Usyk, a fight that a lot of people feel Usyk is going to win.
I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm just acknowledging that those people are out there.
I don't know. Maybe the hierarchy of thought is that Joshua didn't beat Usyk before, he may not beat him again. And if he doesn't, the Yoka people, they might like their chances against Alexander Usyk because he's not the most physically imposing heavyweight. And they have some tools that might fluster him, give him some problems. Maybe they like their chances against Usyk, who they think is going to win that rematch.
In any event, this is excellent fucking news.
I'm looking forward to this fucking fight.